There is a strange kind of exhaustion that has become normal in modern life. Not physical exhaustion, something deeper, a mental fatigue. The feeling that your mind is constantly being pulled somewhere else, even when your body is standing still. Most people can no longer sit in silence without reaching for stimulation. A phone, music, notifications, scrolling, anything to escape stillness. And the terrifying part is that this has become normal. The ancient Stoics warned about this kind of life nearly 2,000 years ago. Not smartphones specifically, but the deeper problem underneath them. A mind cannot govern itself, and today that problem may be worse than ever. Modern life trains the human mind to live in constant stimulation. Notifications, scrolling, news, entertainment, attention is under attack from the moment we wake up. And after enough years living this way, overstimulation starts feeling normal. Calmness feels unfamiliar. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness almost feels threatening. I notice this in myself sometimes. Even when I finally get free time, there is an urge to immediately fill it, to consume something, to distract myself. But boredom itself is not the real problem. The real problem is what boredom reveals. The Stoics believe most people spend their lives escaping themselves, escaping difficult emotions, uncertainty, inner tension, and modern technology has made escape easier than ever before. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. But what happens when your thoughts are constantly interrupted? Eventually people lose the ability to hear themselves altogether. And this creates a strange contradiction. People are more entertained than ever, yet many feel emotionally exhausted, restless, anxious, empty. The modern world gives endless stimulation but very little peace. Because peace was never supposed to come from stimulation. It comes from mastery over attention. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That sentence feels disturbingly relevant today. Because many people are no longer controlling their attention is being controlled for them. And eventually, overstimulation begins affecting the body itself. Sleep worsens, patience disappears. Small inconveniences feel emotionally overwhelming. The nervous system never fully relaxes. People live in constant low-level state of stress without realizing it. And because everyone around them lives the same way, it starts to seem normal. But every now and then, something breaks the illusion, usually in silence. For me, it often happens during long walks away from roads, deadlines, and screens. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable. Then something strange happens. The nervous system slowly unclenches. Thoughts become clearer. Breathing slows down. And suddenly you realize how tense you actually were. The silence exposes the damage. Seneca once wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." Modern people are mentally everywhere all the time, half trapped inside phones, half worrying about tomorrow, half comparing themselves to strangers online. Attention becomes fragmented into hundreds of pieces, and fragmented attention creates fragmented lives. The Stoics understood something modern culture often ignores. Where attention goes, life follows. If your attention constantly flows towards outrage, comparison, and distraction, your inner world slowly begins to resemble those things. That is why many people feel internally chaotic, even when their external lives seem relatively safe. especially in the age of social media. For most of human history, people compared themselves to a small tribe. Now people compare themselves to millions of faces, millions of lifestyles, millions of carefully edited lives designed to trigger insecurity. Marcus Aurelius warned repeatedly against attaching peace to external validation, status, reputation, public approval, because these things are unstable by nature, and a person who builds their peace on unstable foundations eventually becomes unstable themselves. Yet modern culture constantly pushes people towards external identity. More attention, more achievement, more stimulation, more noise. But the Stoics moved in the opposite direction, towards simplicity, towards discipline, towards inner stability. And this is where Stoicism becomes deeply practical for modern life. Because Stoicism is not about escaping the world. It is about protecting your mind from being consumed by it. One of the simplest Stoic practices is learning to sit with discomfort instead of immediately escaping it. That sounds small, but in modern life it's almost revolutionary. Most people cannot tolerate even brief moments without stimulation anymore. A few seconds waiting in line becomes an opportunity to check the phone. A quiet evening becomes background noise. The mind becomes dependent on stimulation the same way the body becomes dependent on sugar. At first it feels pleasurable, eventually it becomes compulsive, and underneath compulsive stimulation often lies something deeper. Avoidance, because silence forces confrontation. Confrontation with anxiety, loneliness, regret, uncertainty, the things distraction temporarily hides. That is why many people become uncomfortable when life finally slows down, because for the first time in years, they are left alone with themselves. And the Stoics believe this confrontation was necessary, not pleasurable, necessary. Epictetus said, "If you seek tranquility, do less." Not because ambition is evil, not because endless mental consumption eventually destroys clarity. The Stoics understood that peace requires subtraction, not constant addition. Less noise, less comparison, less distraction, and more awareness, more presence, more intentional living. But modern culture rarely encourages this, because still people consume less, still people compare less, still people become harder to influence. The Stoics did not believe happiness came from endless pleasure. They believe modern people suffer because they have lost the ability to exist peacefully without constant stimulation. And once you notice this in yourself, it becomes impossible to ignore. You start seeing it everywhere. People walking while scrolling, eating while watching, resting while consuming content. Very few people are ever fully present anymore. And the consequences are enormous, because attention shapes reality. Whatever repeatedly captures your attention slowly shapes your emotional life. If your attention constantly moves towards outrage, your mind becomes agitated. If it constantly moves towards comparison, your mind becomes dissatisfied. If it constantly moves towards stimulation, silence starts feeling unbearable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You become what you give your attention to." And today, many people are unknowingly handing their minds over to systems designed to keep them restless. Not peaceful, restless. Because restless people continue consuming. But the Stoic solution begins with something simple: awareness. The ability to honestly observe your own mental state without immediately escaping it. That is why journaling was so important to many Stoics. Marcus Aurelius wrote meditations as a private confrontation with his own mind, a way of examining his thoughts before they controlled him unconsciously. And many modern people need something similar now more than ever, because many people move through life without ever truly examining themselves, without asking, why am I anxious? Why can't I sit still? Why do I constantly need stimulation? Those questions matter, because if a person never pauses long enough to examine their inner world, they slowly become enslaved by unconscious habits. One of the biggest lies modern culture teaches us is that more stimulation equals more happiness, more entertainment, more convenience, more consumption. But many people eventually discover something strange. After chasing stimulation for years, they still feel empty, because stimulation and fulfillment are not the same thing. The Stoics believe peace comes from alignment between attention, actions, and reality itself. And that kind of peace cannot be consumed. It must be cultivated internally, slowly, deliberately, which is why many Stoic practices seem uncomfortable at first. Silence, stillness, reflection, solitude. These things feel difficult because modern minds have become overstimulated. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Modern culture constantly creates craving for attention, craving for novelty, craving for validation, and endless craving creates endless dissatisfaction. That is why simple moments often feel strangely healing now. A quiet walk, rain against a window, reading without notifications, watching the sky without needing to record it. These moments reconnect people with something modern life slowly steals. Presence, and presence is powerful, because when attention finally slows down, reality becomes visible again. You notice how fast you were living, how tense your body felt, how emotionally reactive your mind has become. The Stoics believe awareness itself begins healing, because once you clearly see your condition, you can no longer unconsciously remain inside it. And perhaps that is why modern people often feel better in nature. Nature does not overload attention. It moves slowly, quietly, indifferently. And the human nervous system seems to remember something there, something calmer. Heraclitus once said, "Nature loves to hide." And maybe peace hides there too, underneath the noise, underneath overstimulation, underneath compulsive distraction. The problem is that most people never stay still long enough to find it, because modern life rewards speed, not reflection, reaction, not awareness, but Stoicism asks people to reclaim authority over their own minds, to stop being pulled helplessly by every distraction and emotional reaction. Epictetus said, "You become a slave to whatever has mastered your attention." And for many modern people, attention has become completely fragmented. That fragmentation slowly drains life itself, because a distracted life is rarely a meaningful one. At the end of life, very few people will wish they had spent more time scrolling, more time consuming, more time reacting. Most people will wish they had been more present, more aware, more alive. And perhaps that is the real danger of overstimulation. Not merely distraction, but the gradual loss of life itself. The Stoics wanted to prevent exactly this kind of life, not through isolation from society, but through mastery over attention, through intentional living, through learning how to remain internally calm even when the world becomes chaotic. And maybe that is the real cure modern people are searching for. Not more stimulation, not another distraction, but the ability to finally sit in silence, without feeling the need to escape themselves. If this video resonated with you, check out my channel for more Stoic content. Thank you for watching.